There's fresh controversy surrounding Princess Diana this lunchtime after newspaper reports linking her with Dodi Fayed, the son of the Harrods boss Mohammed Al Fayed. She's said to have joined the 40-year-old millionaire and a group of friends for a Mediterranean cruise last weekend. Once again, her judgment's under scrutiny, a day before she leaves for a controversial trip to Bosnia to campaign against landmines.
For years, she watched from the sidelines as Meghan's name became intertwined with Diana's legacy. She said nothing through interviews, accusations, family fractures, and endless comparisons. But now, Princess Diana's former friend has finally spoken. And her first words threatened to reopen wounds the palace hoped were buried forever. She had known Diana beyond the headlines, beyond the carefully constructed image of a princess trapped between duty and heartbreak. She had seen the private doubts, the sharp humor, the vulnerability, and the complicated loyalty Diana still carried toward the institution that had caused her so much pain. That history gave her silence unusual weight. While others rushed to compare Meghan's struggles with Diana's, she stayed away from the argument, refusing to become another voice in a battle already overflowing with accusation. But that silence was never indifference. It was restraint. According to those familiar with her thinking, she feared that speaking too soon would do something Diana herself might have hated. Turn her memory into ammunition. Every interview, every royal accusation, every new fracture between Harry and the family seemed to pull Diana deeper into a conflict she could no longer answer for herself. At first, the former friend resisted. She watched as Diana's pain was repeatedly invoked to explain Harry's fears, Meghan's treatment, and the widening distance from the palace. Then, something changed. The comparisons stopped feeling occasional and began to feel permanent. Diana was no longer simply remembered, she was becoming part of the argument itself. Behind the scenes, people who had once known her reportedly began having uncomfortable conversations of their own. Some sympathized with Harry. Others questioned the comparisons. Almost none wanted to speak publicly, because one careless sentence could ignite another royal war. For Diana's former friend, however, one recent moment appears to have crossed a line. Remaining silent suddenly felt less respectful than speaking. And her concern was not initially about whether Meghan was good or bad, loyal or disloyal. It was about Diana, about what was being preserved, what was being simplified, and what was slowly being rewritten. That made her eventual verdict far more dangerous than a simple attack on Meghan, because she was not choosing one royal camp over another. She was challenging the story both sides had built around a woman they all claimed to understand. And when she finally explained what had disturbed her most, it wasn't Meghan's public criticism of the monarchy, it was the way Diana herself had slowly become part of the argument. The comparisons had always been powerful. Two women entering the monarchy, both struggling under extraordinary scrutiny, both described as outsiders trapped inside an unforgiving institution. But Diana's former friend now claims there is one crucial difference, and exposing it could completely change how people view Meghan's connection to Diana. From Harry's perspective, the connection may have felt almost impossible to ignore. He had watched his mother endure relentless attention, public judgment, and a growing sense of isolation. Years later, seeing Meghan face intense scrutiny could naturally awaken the fear that history was beginning to repeat itself. But Diana's former friend reportedly believes that understandable fear slowly turned into something more dangerous. A narrative so emotionally powerful that every similarity began to overshadow the differences. In her view, Diana's life had been reduced to a simple pattern. An outsider enters royal life, suffers under pressure, challenges the institution, and eventually breaks free. Yet the Diana she remembered was far more complicated. Diana could be angry with the monarchy while still feeling tied to it. She could resent royal rules while worrying deeply about William's future within them. She could want independence without wanting every bridge destroyed. That complexity, the former friend fears, has gradually disappeared. Diana made mistakes. She changed her mind. She remained loyal to some traditions while openly resisting others. Her private doubts did not always match her public defiance. And when those contradictions are removed, what remains is a cleaner, more convenient version of Diana, one that can easily be placed over Meghan's story. But the two women, she argues, faced different circumstances, different pressures, and different choices. Similar pain did not automatically mean identical history. That leads to her most uncomfortable observation. Harry's determination to protect Meghan may have been shaped so deeply by what happened to his mother that questioning the comparison itself became emotionally difficult. If he believed Diana's tragedy was repeating, then disagreement could feel less like debate and more like another failure to protect someone he loved. And that, according to the former friend, is where Diana's memory became almost impossible to challenge. Because there was one part of Diana's character she believed had been misunderstood more than anything else. But the former friend's real verdict did not center on press attention, palace protocol, or even public criticism. It centered on something Diana valued fiercely behind closed doors: the difference between independence and permanent war. Then came the sentence that reportedly changed the entire conversation. Diana's former friend did not deny the princess had felt betrayed, isolated, or furious. Instead, she argued that Diana's deepest goal was never to destroy the monarchy, and that distinction leaves Meghan's entire royal narrative facing a stunning new challenge. Her verdict was striking because it refused the easy version of Diana's story. Yes, Diana wanted freedom. Yes, she wanted dignity, space, and control over a life that had often felt controlled by others. But according to the former friend, she never imagined freedom as the complete destruction of every royal bond surrounding her sons. That distinction matters. Diana could criticize the palace fiercely while still understanding what the crown would one day mean to William. She could feel wounded by royal life while remaining deeply aware that both boys were tied to an institution bigger than any one argument. Her anger, the friend suggests, often existed beside another instinct: protect the future, preserve some stability, and leave room for relationships to recover. That is where the comparison with Harry and Meghan becomes far more uncomfortable. Their rupture with the royal family, in this dramatized account, no longer feels temporary. Each public conflict appears to harden the distance. Each accusation makes reconciliation more difficult, and the former friend fears Diana's name has sometimes been used to give emotional meaning to choices Diana herself might have questioned. The most painful part concerns Harry. He may genuinely believe he is honoring his mother by refusing to accept the system he associates with her suffering. Yet in doing so, he may also be moving farther from something Diana desperately wanted protected: the bond between her sons. Still, the former friend does not absolve the palace. She remembers the failures, the coldness, and the pressures that helped push Diana toward despair. Her verdict is devastating precisely because it refuses both extremes. Diana was not a flawless victim who never made mistakes, but neither was she a revolutionary determined to reduce the monarchy to ashes. She wanted freedom without losing everything. And once those words began circulating, they did not remain outside royal walls for long. Inside the palace, the reaction was not celebration. Because if Diana's former friend was challenging Meghan's use of Diana's legacy, she was also reminding the monarchy of its own uncomfortable role in creating that legacy in the first place. One might expect the palace to welcome a voice challenging Meghan's connection to Diana. But behind royal doors, the reaction is said to have been far more uneasy. Because the former friend's words contain a dangerous second message, Meghan may be rewriting Diana. But the monarchy never fully answered for Diana either. That made the intervention useful and dangerous at the same time. Senior figures could see how easily the comments might weaken one of the most powerful comparisons surrounding Harry and Meghan. Yet openly embracing them would carry a price. The moment the palace appeared to use Diana's former friend against Meghan, the conversation could swing backward toward Diana herself and toward the questions the institution has spent decades trying to contain. Older advisors understood that risk instinctively. Some had lived through the years when Diana's relationship with the monarchy became increasingly painful and public. Newer strategists, however, were dealing with a different challenge, protecting the modern crown from a conflict that continued to pull the past into the present. And at the center of that tension stood William. For him, Diana's legacy could never be reduced to strategy. She was not simply a historical figure or a symbol in a public dispute. She was his mother. That made every new comparison deeply personal. The suggestion that he might privately resent seeing Diana repeatedly invoked in arguments around Meghan and Harry carried obvious emotional weight. Whether the comparison favored the Sussexes or attacked them, the result was the same. Diana was being pulled back into a conflict she could no longer speak for herself. Charles faced an equally uncomfortable problem. Any renewed discussion of Diana inevitably reopened memories of their marriage, its collapse, and the institution that surrounded both of them. Silence protected him from one danger, but silence also allowed others to define the past. That is why whispers inside royal circles reportedly leaned toward one preference above all others: stop using Diana as ammunition entirely. But the former friend's intervention made that almost impossible. A person connected to Diana's private life had now challenged the public mythology surrounding her, forcing everyone to confront an awkward question: who actually has the right to say what Diana would have wanted? And the answer carried its greatest emotional consequences for one person. Because for Harry, this was never merely a debate about royal history. Diana is the deepest emotional fault line in his life, and hearing one of her former friends challenge the meaning he has attached to her could feel intensely personal. Harry has spent years explaining many of his choices through one central fear: that history could repeat itself. But now, someone who actually knew Diana is questioning that interpretation. Suddenly, Harry faces a brutal possibility. What if protecting Meghan and protecting his mother's memory are no longer the same thing? For Harry, Diana has never been just a memory. Losing her so young left behind questions, anger, and a sense of unfinished protection that followed him into adulthood. As his relationship with Meghan came under pressure, that old fear found a new purpose. Protecting his wife became intertwined with refusing to stand by while another woman he loved suffered under scrutiny he believed looked painfully familiar. That is what makes the former friend's intervention so difficult. If Harry dismisses her completely, he risks rejecting the perspective of someone who knew Diana beyond the public mythology. But accepting even part of her argument opens an even more painful question. Would Diana really have wanted the separation from William to become this deep? Harry could easily see the remarks as an intrusion. His grief is his own. His memories are his own. No former friend can fully explain what it meant to be Diana's son, or what he believed he witnessed as a child. To him, attempts to define what Diana would have wanted might feel like another effort to control a story that has already been interpreted by everyone else. Yet William remains the complication Harry cannot simply erase. Whatever Diana thought of the palace, both brothers knew how fiercely she cared about them. And that makes their fracture the one part of the former friend's verdict that may be hardest to ignore. Harry may have turned Diana into an emotional compass for resistance and protection, while William may carry another memory of her, one centered on duty, continuity, and keeping the family from collapsing entirely. Neither interpretation has to be false. That is precisely why the conflict is so tragic. Both sons may believe they are defending the same woman while moving in opposite directions. Then another pressure begins to build. Within this dramatized account, Meghan is said to be deeply unhappy with the way the remarks are being framed, especially as criticism of Diana's legacy begins shifting toward criticism of her personally. Now Harry faces a dangerous choice: defend Meghan immediately and ignite another round of royal warfare, or remain silent and risk allowing the former friend's verdict to define the story without challenge. And while Harry wrestled with an impossible emotional inheritance, attention quickly shifted to Meghan, because the former friend's remarks were now being interpreted not just as a defense of Diana, but as a direct judgment of the Duchess herself. Meghan's supporters saw the problem immediately. Why should another person, however close she once was to Diana, be allowed to decide what lessons Harry should take from his own mother's life? Behind the outrage, however, a deeper fear was emerging. The Diana comparison that once strengthened Meghan's story might now become its biggest vulnerability. From Meghan's side, the premise itself feels unfair. She never needed to declare herself a second Diana for the comparison to take on a life of its own. Commentators drew parallels. Headlines amplified them. Harry's own fears gave them emotional force. Over time, public discussion created a connection so powerful that Meghan could barely escape it, whether she embraced it or rejected it. That made the criticism feel deeply personal. Her supporters could argue that Diana is repeatedly invoked when Meghan is being judged, yet the moment Meghan's experiences are discussed alongside Diana's, she is accused of exploiting the memory. It creates an impossible standard. Diana can be used against her, but never in a way that explains her. There is another problem. No former friend, however close, can know exactly how Diana would have reacted to a different era, a different media environment, or a different royal crisis. Meghan could see the intervention as yet another outsider claiming ownership over a family history that ultimately belongs most intimately to Diana's sons. But one implication cuts deeper than the rest: the suggestion that Meghan's choices helped widen the distance between Harry and William. That accusation changes the emotional temperature completely. Meghan's position is built around survival, boundaries, and refusing to remain inside situations she believes caused harm. The former friend's position is different. She keeps returning to reconciliation, unfinished bonds, and what Diana may have wanted preserved between her sons. Neither argument disappears simply because the other exists. And that creates a strategic trap. If Meghan attacks Diana's former friend too aggressively, she risks appearing disrespectful towards someone connected to a woman Harry still reveres. But if she says nothing, the friend's interpretation may settle into the public mind as the version left unanswered. For the first time, silence and resistance carry equal danger. But just as the debate seemed destined to become another Meghan versus the palace confrontation, a second revelation shifted everything. Because Diana's former friend had not finished speaking about the person she believed was carrying the heaviest burden of all. Then came the twist nobody expected. Diana's former friend did not reserve her sympathy for the palace, Meghan, or even Harry. Instead, she turned toward William, and what she allegedly said about the future king revealed why this controversy is far more painful than another chapter in the Sussex feud. William, in her view, carries a burden almost nobody can fully understand. He is Diana's son, but he is also tied to the institution that once stood at the center of her deepest conflict. That leaves him trapped between memory and duty. He cannot speak about his mother with complete freedom, because every emotional sentence risks becoming a royal statement, a political signal, or another weapon in the family dispute. And the repeated comparisons between Diana and Meghan make that position even harder. If William stays silent, others define his mother for him. If he challenges Harry's interpretation, he risks appearing to dismiss his brother's pain. Either choice comes with a cost. The former friend suggests that this may be one reason William has guarded Diana's memory so carefully, even as her name continues to surface in arguments he cannot control. Privately, she believes, the most painful issue may not be Meghan at all. It may be the feeling that Diana's identity has been pulled into a conflict she can no longer answer. That leads to the friend's deepest concern. Diana, she argues, would have been devastated by the long-term collapse of the relationship between William and Harry. At that point, the question of who is right begins to feel almost irrelevant. What matters is what has been lost. Because Diana's most important inheritance was never a ring, a photograph, a title, or even public sympathy. It was the bond between her sons. Every accusation makes that inheritance more fragile. Every public clash makes the road back longer. Every attempt to win the argument risks creating another reason not to reconcile. And this is where the friend's verdict becomes truly devastating. No victory over the palace. Meghan, the media, or anyone else would compensate Diana for seeing her sons permanently divided. And that changed the stakes completely. Because the question was no longer whether Meghan resembled Diana. It was whether everyone involved had become so consumed by Diana's legacy that they were destroying the one thing she would have protected most. The tiaras, rings, watches, letters, photographs, and private keepsakes have always carried enormous fascination. But Diana's former friend reportedly believes the most important inheritance was invisible, and unlike gold or diamonds, it could be lost forever. Her warning transforms a family feud into something far more tragic. Royal families preserve memory through objects. A jewel can pass from one generation to another. A handwritten letter can survive decades. A watch, a photograph, even a small personal possession can become more powerful with time because it carries the weight of the person who once held it. But the former friend's argument reaches beyond anything locked in a drawer or protected inside a royal collection. Diana's true inheritance, she suggests, was emotional. It was the shared childhood of two brothers who lost their mother too soon. It was trust built before titles, public duties, marriages, and rival camps complicated everything. It was loyalty, memory, the private understanding between William and Harry that no one else could fully share. Yet as the years passed, each son appeared to inherit a different part of Diana. Harry became closely associated with her defiance, her pain, and her refusal to remain silent when she felt trapped. William carried another side, her hopes for the future, her connection to the monarchy through him, and the knowledge that one day he would stand at the center of the institution she had challenged. Those two versions of Diana do not have to cancel each other out. Both can exist at once. But conflict changed them into competing claims. Meghan then entered a family already carrying unresolved grief, old resentments, and different memories of the same woman. Catherine, Charles, and palace advisors became part of that emotional struggle too. Whether they wanted to or not, what looked publicly like a battle over loyalty and royal power was increasingly rooted in something older and more painful. That is why the former friend's warning cuts so deeply. Anyone can claim to defend Diana. But if her memory becomes ammunition, even devotion can begin to damage the legacy it is supposed to protect. And eventually, there was only one question left. And when she was finally pushed to answer the question everyone had been avoiding, what would Diana want if she could see the family now? Her answer left neither Meghan, Harry, William, nor the palace with anywhere comfortable to hide. After all the accusations, comparisons, interviews, betrayals, and years of silence, Diana's former friend reduces the entire royal crisis to one devastating judgment. She believes Diana would understand Harry's fear, recognize Meghan's pain, remember the palace's failures, and still be horrified by what happened between her sons. That verdict offers comfort to nobody. Diana, in this telling, would understand why Harry became obsessed with protecting his family. She might recognize the fear behind Meghan's boundaries and the desperation that comes when someone believes an institution is no longer safe for them. But understanding those choices would not mean accepting permanent destruction. The palace would not escape either. The former friend's argument leaves room for a painful truth. Harry's distrust did not appear from nowhere. Old failures, unresolved wounds, and years of emotional distance helped create the conditions for everything that followed. So there is no clean victory. Meghan is left facing questions about whether protection became separation. Harry must confront whether resistance can become its own prison. William must consider whether duty has made reconciliation harder. Charles and the institution remain shadowed by choices made long before the current feud began. What looks like rivalry, then, begins to look more like grief that was never properly resolved. And that is where the warning becomes most powerful. Diana's memory cannot belong to whichever side is winning the argument. It cannot be claimed by Harry against William, by the palace against Meghan, or by critics against the Sussexes. For Harry, loyalty to his mother may eventually demand something harder than defiance, rebuilding what has been broken. For William, healing may require moments when he responds not as the future king, but simply as Diana's eldest son. And Meghan's place remains deliberately unsettled. Villain, outsider, catalyst, misunderstood figure, or perhaps someone who entered a family already carrying wounds far older than she was. Diana's legacy, therefore, is unfinished. Her sons are still deciding what it means. Because, in the end, the most shocking part of her verdict may not be what she believes about Meghan at all. It may be the possibility that Diana's story is still shaping the monarchy, still dividing her sons, and still waiting for an ending nobody inside the palace knows how to write.